You ever have one of those neighbors who treats the whole block like their backyard kingdom? 3 nights after they moved in, I found 4 perfectly drilled holes running along the top rail of the fence I'd just put up neat, the kind of holes a cordless drill leaves when someone's trying to peep through without getting caught. I thought it was a prank at first, until I saw the slow, careful way a flashlight beam would slip through one of those holes and rest on my grandmother's old porch chair, like somebody was reading our lives through slats. That's when I knew this was going to be more than petty. My name's Ethan Parks. I live on a quiet lane in Cedar Hollow, 3 houses down from the cul-de-sac, where people like everything neat and predictable. I'm the kind of guy who waters the mailbox plants, waves at mail carriers, keeps to himself till a woman named Linda Halvorson decided my property line was her entertainment. Linda was the new HOA president, clipboard always in hand, a little too proud of her clipped hedges and spotless mailbox, and a little too interested in what I was doing behind my fence. She called a board meeting by week 2, and by week 3 she had a folder of complaints in those holes. The first act of this whole mess is small, almost laughable when I tell it now, but it's where everything shifted. I confronted her on the sidewalk, coffee in hand, sun hitting the rim of my cap. "Hey, Linda, did you see those holes?" I asked, thinking she'd laugh. "Tell me kids do stupid stuff." Instead, she squared her shoulders and said, "Ethan, it's about safety. People need to be watched." There it was, the word she kept using, like a charm, safety. But the way she said it sounded like surveillance, and suddenly her concern felt less neighborly and more territorial. You can reason with a person once, maybe twice, but after that you start documenting. I put up a cheap motion camera, nothing intrusive, just something pointed at the fence line, time-stamped, that sort of thing. I planted myself in the yard less and watched more. And that's when the little war turned theatrical. Because one night at midnight, the camera caught a silhouette leaning over the top rail, drill light flashing, not a child, not a stray, but Linda's son, Tyler, sleeves rolled, working fast. He froze when the sensor tripped, looked straight into the lens, and then walked off like it was all nothing. I downloaded the clip, labeled it, sent it to the HOA, and yes, I sent a copy to the police, but nothing really happened, because by then Linda's complaints about my unsightly fence had already gained traction in the neighborhood newsletter. It's wild how quickly things escalate when you decide to push back. I didn't want to be dramatic, I just wanted privacy. But after Tyler's visit, and after a few awkward HOA emails calling my fence distracting, I got clever. I built a harmless paint rig, nothing illegal, just a sprinkler-style contraption that would puff a biodegradable powder when a motion sensor tripped. I'll admit it, I wanted to send a message that would make the point without hurting anyone. We tested it on a scrap of plywood out by the garage, and the first time the powder went off it looked like confetti in slow motion, bright and ridiculous. I put it in the back, behind the fence, wired to a sensor aimed at where anyone leaning over would stand. The night I finally hit the trigger, I wasn't there. I watched the footage later, Linda's profile approaching, flashlight in hand, because she was always checking other people's yards, Tyler behind her muttering something I couldn't make out. The sensor tripped, and boom, a harmless cloud of blue powder puffed into the air, catching on their coats and on the camera lens they'd apparently set up to spy through the holes. Linda's voice, "Oh, it was a thing. What in God's name, you're insane," she cried, flailing like a woman who hadn't expected to lose control for once. That clip went up on our little neighborhood chat, and suddenly half the cul-de-sac was laughing, the other half was texting screenshots, and Linda was furious. She brought it to the next HOA meeting like it was a crime wave. "This is harassment," she said, voice sharp, stamping her legal pad with righteous outrage. The board mostly wanted the noise to stop. They wanted peace, not spectacle. But Linda kept pushing, calling it a violation, threatening legal action. I kept calm, documentation, timestamps, recorded conversations, because when things go sideways you need to be paper perfect. Still, something about her fury made me uneasy, like someone who'd never been told no and didn't know how to handle it. Then things crossed the line. One night our power went out, a quick, precise cut at the breaker box, not a storm, nothing accidental. Our security lights died at once, and the little backup on my router gone. I popped the breaker the next morning and found a screwdriver lodged in the latch. Someone had forced the panel. That was the night I stopped thinking of this as neighbor drama and started thinking of it as escalation with real danger. I went to the police with the evidence, timestamps, the camera clip of Tyler, the broken breaker latch. They filed a report. They told me it would be investigated. Meanwhile, Linda denied everything in a way that made her sound reasonable, and her supporters called me petty. What turned the tide, the part that I replay in my head most nights, was the courthouse corridor scene. We had footage, recorded proof of trespass and vandalism. Tyler on camera, Linda's voice on a recording, her throwing a handful of paint across my lawn in daylight like some cartoon villain. Police served a citation. The HOA put her on administrative leave. In court, she sat rigid, jaw clenched, staring like she'd been wronged by a system that didn't see the whole picture. I remember the sound of the judge's gavel, a small, satisfying thunk that cut through all the noise. There was no big arrest, no dramatic cuffs, but there was a restraining order, an order to stop contact, and a requirement to pay for repairs. It wasn't cinematic victory, but it was legal accountability, which in our world sometimes counts for more. You'd think that would quiet everything, right? That would be the end of a story about a white picket fence and a neighborhood war. But the last act is what really got me, and it's what I want you to picture like a scene out of an indie film. The house across the way, Linda's house, went up for sale a month later. People said they were relieved. We repaired the fence with help from neighbors. We painted the deck. My daughter. Yes, I have a daughter. She's not part of this story. She's safe in school. Stopped flinching at footsteps in the yard. Life found its groove. Yet when the moving truck came, Linda stood in her yard like she'd been exiled, cheeks red, hands clenched around a paper cup. She didn't look like the villain you see in movies. She looked like someone who'd lost fight and status and maybe a piece of herself. So what did I learn? That boundaries matter, and documentation matters more. That being the calm guy with a camera sometimes wins over being the loudest person with a clipboard. That communities are messy, rules help, but so does empathy, and sometimes both are absent. Linda wasn't a monster. She was a person who'd let a small thing spin into a war, who'd confused control with safety. I'm not proud of my paint rig. Not really. I'm glad it didn't hurt anybody. But I'm aware of how small my line was between mischief and escalation. It's easy to tell yourself you're justified when someone watches your life through a drill hole, but it's harder to walk the line between standing up and stooping to someone else's level. If there's a final frame to this, it's not a tidy wrap. We fixed the fence, the neighborhood breathed easier, the HOA tightened their policies on surveillance and on how complaints are handled, and Linda moved on the kind of move that clears front porches and conversations. But sometimes in the late summer, when the street sits quiet and the cicadas start up, I still notice a shadow near that old cul-de-sac lamp, a reminder that peace isn't permanent, that vigilance is quiet work, not a headline. So tell me, what would you have done? Would you have documented and called the police? Or would you have taken your own creative revenge? Is there ever a right way to respond when someone violates your privacy? Or does it always turn into a messy tangle of pride and law? Drop a comment and tell me which side you land on: justice, privacy, community, whatever matters to you. Share if you think neighborhoods need better rules, or if we all just need to learn how to be better neighbors. I'd love to hear your stories. Maybe your experience will teach me something I missed. Because if there's one thing this whole mess taught me, it's that we're all a little blamable and a little wrong sometimes. And the better we talk about it, the better our fences and our lives will be.